hours after my C-section, I texted, "I just need someone to be with me." Mom replied, "We're all busy. Figure it out." I read it over and over, holding back tears. 3 weeks later, I received 40 calls from my mom saying, "We need help." Immediately, I got angry and replied. Hours after my C-section, the nurse helped me hold my daughter for the first time. She was smaller than I expected, quiet, and not breathing the way they wanted. They placed her on my chest for a second, and then took her. I could not sit up. I could not follow. I just watched the doors close. I kept asking if she was okay. They kept saying they were checking. Time felt strange. I stared at the ceiling and counted the tiles. My hands were shaking, and I could not feel my legs. When they brought her back, they said she was stable now and that everything looked fine. She had a tiny tube on her face and a monitor on her foot. They laid her beside me and showed me how to touch her without pulling the wires. I nodded, like I understood. The room was quiet. Too quiet. No mom, no dad, no sister, no husband. The chair by the window was empty. The flowers other people had in their rooms were missing here. I looked at my phone and saw no new messages. I typed, "I just need someone to be with me." That was all. No explanation, no story. 14 minutes later, my mom replied in all caps, "We're all busy. Figure it out." I read it, put the phone down, picked it up, read it again, then again. I stared at the wall and waited for something else to come through. Nothing did. That night, my daughter had trouble feeding. The nurse showed me again and again how to hold her. She kept unlatching, kept trying. My incision burned every time I shifted. I stayed awake watching her chest move because I was afraid it would stop. The next day, they said she needed to stay another night for monitoring. I signed the papers with a shaking hand. I texted my sister to let her know. She read it and did not answer. My mom sent one message later about how the family had a lot going on and she was overwhelmed. No question about the baby. No question about me. When I was discharged, I carried my daughter out myself. The nurse asked if someone was coming to get us. I said yes, because I did not want to explain. I waited in the lobby until a rideshare arrived. At home, it was just me and her. The nights were long. The days blurred together. I watched videos on how to clean the incision. I timed feedings. I counted diapers. I checked her breathing. I kept my phone close in case my husband called. He did not. 3 weeks passed like that. No visits, no help, no questions. Then one night, at 2:14 a.m., my phone started buzzing. It did not stop. I picked it up and saw 40 missed calls from my mom. Voicemails stacked on top of each other. Texts coming in back to back. One message said, "We need help." Immediately, I did not answer right away. I fed my daughter, changed her, rocked her until she fell asleep on my chest. Then I put her down and looked at the screen. I wrote back, "Is this how it works now? I go through everything alone, and you only call when you need something." The response came fast, faster than any reply they had ever sent me. They told me my sister was 3 months pregnant. He was not feeling well. Things were hard. They needed support. They had not told me she was pregnant. Not once, but now they needed me. I read the message 3 times before it really sank in. My sister was pregnant. 3 months feeling sick, and they needed support. Not congratulations, not an apology, not even a "how are you?" Just, "we need." I asked why nobody told me. My mom said things were hectic and it slipped. That was it. No excuse. No shame. Then she said my sister was struggling emotionally and physically, and it was hard on everyone. I waited to see if she would mention my daughter. She didn't. My dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail saying they were under a lot of pressure, and family helps family. That line stuck with me because family hadn't helped me at all. I was sitting on the edge of the bed holding my daughter when my mom texted again. She said my sister couldn't work right now and money was tight. She said they might need help with bills. She didn't say how much. She didn't need to. I already knew where it was going. I stared at the wall and laughed. It wasn't funny. It was just unreal. They had zero interest in my pregnancy. The last 2 months, I was in and out of appointments. I had complications. I told them. They said everyone has something going on. When I went into labor early, I told them. My mom said, "Keep us posted." Then nothing. No one showed up. No one checked in. And now they wanted support, emotional and financial, like I hadn't just had surgery, like I wasn't alone with a newborn, like I wasn't still healing. I didn't want to start a fight. I also didn't want to pretend this was normal. So I said, I can't help right now. I'm still recovering and taking care of my baby by myself. My mom replied with a long message about how hard it is to be a parent and how one day I'd understand. That one made me angry. I already understood too well. My sister finally texted. She said she didn't know they hadn't told me. She said she was having a rough time and hoped I could be there for her. No mention of being there for me. I put the phone down and didn't answer. My daughter started crying, and I picked her up. She felt warm and small and real. Everything else felt distant. Later that day, my mom called again. I let it ring. She texted again, about needing help with groceries and appointments. She asked if I had any savings. I had to read that slowly. I had just paid hospital bills. I had just bought baby supplies. I hadn't worked in months. And she was asking about my savings. I didn't reply. I didn't block them either. I just went quiet. That night, I lay awake, listening to my daughter breathe, and thinking about how fast they remembered me when they needed something. I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. It had been 4 months since my husband disappeared. No calls, no texts, no explanation. One day he was here, the next he wasn't. At first, I was sure something awful had happened. A car crash, a robbery. I called the hospitals, filed a missing person report. I barely slept. But after 2 weeks and no updates, people around me started hinting at what they thought was obvious, that he left me, that he'd walked away from his pregnant wife. And honestly, after a while, I started to believe it too. What other explanation made sense? The police weren't finding anything. His phone was dead. His accounts were untouched. Meanwhile, I gave birth alone, cried alone, raised our daughter alone. I forced myself not to think about him. I didn't want to be the woman checking her phone 100 times a day. So, when he knocked on my door exactly 4 months later, I didn't move. He knocked again, softer this time. I opened it, half expecting a delivery or a neighbor, and there he was, thinner, unshaven. He looked like a version of himself I had never seen. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, with my daughter in my arms. He said my name, looked at the baby, and whispered, "Is that her?" Then he stepped inside fully, carefully, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask him where he'd been. I was too tired for all that. He told me he'd been in prison in Spain. I thought he was lying. Who wouldn't? But then he explained how someone he'd worked with overseas had dragged him into an investment deal that went bad. Funds were misused. Documents were faked. He got caught up in it and detained. No communication allowed. No contact with anyone back home. He said the only thing that kept him sane was thinking about me and the baby. He didn't even know if she'd been born. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't tell some grand story. He just asked if he could hold her. I handed her to him, and for the first time, in weeks, I felt something shift. That night, he stayed. He made dinner, changed 2 diapers, held her while I showered, sat on the floor, and let her sleep on his chest. The next morning, he woke up early, made coffee, and told me he wanted to help with everything, catch up on everything. So, I told him. I told him how no one came to the hospital, how my family ignored me, how my sister didn't even acknowledge the birth. How my mom asked me for money while I was still healing. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded, jaw clenched. That same day, my mom texted again. I told her he was back. She answered in seconds. So glad he's safe. That must be a relief. Then you've been through a lot. Just remember he left once. Then again 20 minutes later. You don't actually believe that prison story, do you? I showed him the text. He didn't get angry. He just said, "That's not surprising." I didn't respond to her. I didn't owe her that. But I knew right then they weren't going to stop. They were going to try to turn me against him. And they had no idea how much stronger I was now. After he came back, it was like a hole had been filled in my life. Except now there were cracks everywhere else. He was gentle with our daughter in a way that felt almost unreal. He'd missed her birth, missed everything. Yet here he was rocking her in the middle of the night, humming low songs under his breath, reading articles on how to bathe a newborn like he was cramming for an exam. He didn't talk much about Spain unless I asked. When I did, his answers were short, factual. He didn't want to scare me with details, but I could tell it had changed him. The way he kept the front door double locked, the way he jumped every time his phone rang. And then my parents started pushing harder. At first, it was just small jabs. Texts from my mom saying things like, "Is he helping or just playing the part? You really trust someone who ghosted his own wife and child? That doesn't sound like love, Emily. That sounds like control." My sister joined in, guilt-tripping me about her pregnancy. She said she was exhausted, scared, and couldn't believe I'd turned cold on her. She said she needed emotional support and maybe a bit of financial help if we had it. But I saw through it. They hadn't cared about me or my baby until the moment they felt pressure. Now I was suddenly valuable. Now I was someone to be guilted into giving. Then something I didn't expect happened. One morning, while the baby napped, he handed me a folder. Inside was a notarized document with my name on it. It was a trust set up in a different country, months before I gave birth. It held enough money to cover our expenses for years. He told me that before everything went bad, he'd already started planning for us. He was nervous about how unstable things were getting. He'd meant to surprise me after the birth, but when he got detained, he thought I'd never see any of it. He'd arranged it so the money would eventually be released, even if something happened to him. I didn't know what to say. He looked at me and said, "They don't get to control you anymore." That night, my mom called 3 times. I didn't answer. Then she sent a voice message. She sounded calm, fake calm. She said she hoped I was safe. Said she understood if I was being pressured to cut ties and that they were considering contacting someone professional if I didn't respond. I showed him the message. He stared at it for a long time and said, "This is how people pretend to care while planning to ruin you." The next day, my sister sent a photo of her hospital wristband. She'd been admitted overnight. Said she was having pain, that it might be serious. No other details, just that she needed her sister. For the first time in weeks, I felt my chest tighten. Not out of guilt, but confusion. She hadn't said a word about being in the hospital until that moment. Then a second message came through from my mom. "She's losing the baby, and you're not even here." I sat on the edge of the bed holding my daughter, reading those words again and again. And then my phone rang, but this time, it wasn't my mom. It was the hospital. When I saw the hospital name light up on my screen, I froze. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they were calling to confirm something routine. But the longer I stared at it, the more I felt this cold weight settle in my chest. I answered. It was the patient advocate. She was calm, polite, too practiced. She asked if I was Shirley, confirmed my number, then asked if I was my sister's emergency contact. I told her no. She paused for a second, then said, "Well, your sister listed you as the one responsible for handling her care plan, specifically the billing portion." I sat on the floor. She told me my sister had been admitted with severe abdominal pain. They were doing everything they could, but it was serious. There were signs of complications and the pregnancy was at risk. But then she said it again. Your sister stated that you would be taking care of the hospital expenses. He was very clear about it. I almost laughed. It didn't even feel real. I told the advocate I had never agreed to anything like that my sister hadn't even told me she was pregnant until 3 weeks ago, and that she had gone out of her way to avoid me my entire pregnancy. She sounded surprised. She apologized. She said she'd update the file, but the damage was already done. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring at the carpet. My daughter was sleeping nearby in her bassinet. The house was quiet. My husband walked in from the kitchen and looked at me, waiting. I told him what happened, that my sister hadn't just assumed I'd care. She told him I would. He didn't get angry. He just looked tired and sad. Later that day, my mom called. She didn't mention the hospital bill. She just asked in this overly soft voice, "Are you really not coming to see your sister? She's losing the baby. This isn't about the past anymore." She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "We shouldn't have ignored you." She just made it about me, about how heartless I was being now. I didn't go that night. Instead, I sat with my husband on the floor of our daughter's room. He wrapped his arms around me while I stared at the baby monitor, watching her sleep. I felt disconnected from everything, angry, numb, guilty, and still strangely not surprised. They had taken so much from me already. My pregnancy, my delivery, my recovery. They turned it all into something I had to survive, instead of something I could remember with joy. And now they expected me to show up like none of that ever happened. The next morning, I got dressed and told my husband I was going alone. I didn't know what I expected. The hospital room was quiet. My sister was pale, curled on her side, hooked to monitors. She looked small, exhausted. She looked at me and said, "They said you weren't coming." I said, "You told them I was paying." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I didn't know what else to do. I panicked." I asked her, "Did you really think I'd just take care of it after everything?" She said, "I thought if you saw me like this, you'd remember we're sisters." That made me pause. Not because I forgave her, but because I knew what it felt like to lie in a hospital bed and wonder why no one showed up. For a second, I saw myself in her. She reached for my hand, and I let her. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed to know that, even after everything, I hadn't become like them. She gripped my hand like she thought I'd pull away. I didn't. Not yet. The machines beside her beeped in steady rhythm. Her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying for hours. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, taking it all in. After a while, she said, "They told me I should have reached out sooner, that maybe this wouldn't have happened if I wasn't so stressed." I didn't say what I was thinking, that they'd said the same thing to me when I went into early labor, that everything was always someone else's fault when things went wrong, but no one took responsibility when it really mattered. She said the doctors told her she had a partial placental abruption, that the baby still had a heartbeat, but the odds weren't good. She was trying to stay hopeful, but she looked like someone who already knew the ending. I asked if she was in pain. She nodded. Then, for the first time in months, we talked. Really talked. She told me she'd been scared not just of the pregnancy, but of how she treated me. She admitted my mom discouraged her from being involved during mine. That she told her I was too emotional and needed space. That if I really wanted support, I would have asked. That part stung. I did ask. I begged for it. I realized then that my mom had played us both, kept us divided, kept us too far apart to see what was really going on. And maybe we let her. She said she wasn't expecting me to fix anything, just that she didn't want to go through it alone. I didn't forgive her in that moment, but I stayed. I stayed through the shift change. I stayed when the nurse came in with another form. I stayed when they started prepping her for an emergency procedure. I waited outside, holding my daughter in my arms, watching the hallway, hearing nothing. And then the doctor came out. The baby didn't make it. I walked back into the room and saw her curled up, shaking. Her whole body looked like it had collapsed in on itself. I sat next to her and held her. She didn't say a word, just pressed her face into my shoulder and sobbed. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't. I didn't say you'll get through this because she might not. I just sat there and let her cry. When I finally left the hospital, it was dark. My husband was waiting outside with the car. I got in quietly. He asked, "How is she?" I said, "Empty." We drove home in silence. Weeks passed. The calls from my parents slowed. My mom sent one long email about how she was heartbroken over the family falling apart, how she wished we could go back to how things were. I didn't respond. I didn't block her either. I just let her words float in limbo. My sister and I talk sometimes now. Not every day. Not like before, but enough. She asks about the baby. I send her photos. We don't talk about the hospital. We don't talk about the past. Not yet. But maybe someday. For now, it's just me, my daughter, and the man who came back. The man who never let me fall again.